Gyan Ganga on the Virat Hindustan Sangam channel. We have with us our Wednesday guest Rajiv Malhotra from the US and Dr. Subramaniam Swamy. And today we will be talking about US influence on India. So, with this opening remarks, as you all know, we are every day at 8 p.m. Indian Standard Time on various social media channels. I request Rajiv Malhotra ji to start the discussion and then Dr. Swamy will join. Over to you, Rajiv Malhotra ji.
Namaste, namaste, Dr. Swamy, namaste, Jagdish ji, and all the viewers. I'm delighted to be back. I want to start by saying that there are two dimensions. There is the aesthetic, emotional, psychological dimension of relationships, but there's also the pragmatic dimension. And the pragmatic dimension counts, really. Aesthetically, you can have jhula and hugging, and I love you and you love me, and the tweets and big tamasha, big mela. Indians are really awed by tamasha, pageantry, festivals, these kind of things. So the mela atmosphere is very positive between India and the US, but to a large extent, this is good optics for domestic politics for both sides. Trump loves this ability to say that I got this friend and that friend. But remember that Trump also says that the North Korean Kim Jong is also his best friend. And he also says, I love President Xi. I call him a friend. So being a friend at the aesthetic, emotional level does not prevent at the pragmatic level US taking strong action against the same party. The same party could be aesthetically your friend and pragmatically somebody you take strong action. Now, it is important to note on a pragmatic level, US imposed some sanctions, trade tariffs on India, and they haven't been lifted. There's a talk of discussion going on for trade, but nothing material came out of it. Just a week ago, the US Commission on International Religious Freedom blacklisted India as with the small number of countries which are the worst offenders of religious freedom, and India is listed as one of those. Then there is a lot of human rights groups that are constantly attacking India from the US, and India has also been placed on the priority watch list for intellectual property by the US. So when you look at it in terms of the pragmatics are mixed. Now, the real institutional level, not presidential politics, White House optics, but the real institutions of United States that have to be, India has to be concerned about and has to bring them on board long term, are the military. The Pentagon, the military is a very solid long-term institution, and you got to work with them. Another is the corporate sector. These people are very pragmatic. They're not interested in, hugging, shugging, and put mala on this, that, and all that. They're not into all that. So that's my opening remark, that there is a mixed situation, very good optics, but at the pragmatic level, it needs to be seen. So, Dr. Swamy, what's your, we can go back and forth, so I'd love to see your views on all this.
Well, you have lived enough in the United States to understand their psychology. I've also spent a lot of time in the United States, so I know the way they think. I agree with the point you have made in the introduction, that the United States is basically a country which anchors its policy on give and take. That is, the atmospherics, don't really mean very much to them. Yes, the bonhomie is good in terms of getting together, meeting without tension. But ultimately, when the conference is over or the meetings are over, they measure what did we get and what did we give. So what you give and what you got, they make a assessment of that. And according to me, the United States has in the relations with India, according to me, in practical terms, in material terms, has deteriorated in the last 3 years, very substantially. And so there was a lot of expectation because the BJP was considered as a right-wing party and therefore and pro-market, and therefore these expectations have been belied. Maybe the expectations are too high. For instance, the United States had to hope that we will go to Afghanistan and with our troops and take over from the United States, and the United States was ready for that. They also formed the Indo-Pacific. They renamed the Asia Pacific as Indo-Pacific, and expected India to play a major role. We have not. We have sort of browned off on that. So let me begin by saying that I would like, before I refer back to you, I would like to know whether we need to have good relations with China, with the United States, and as a consequence, permit the United States influence within India and the United States to influence our policy. First of all, there are some ground realities. Both our political systems is more or less the same. We have a constitution, we have democracy, and the rule of law, and therefore, and fundamental rights also. And therefore, there is one clear political reason why the two of us should be together, because we would like to see the whole world being democratic. And both of us should be together. Two democratic countries should be together, especially when the world has many non-democratic countries, jihadi countries, all kinds of countries, human rights violating countries, butchering countries like we saw when Yugoslavia broke up. So therefore, I think this is point number one, which has to be the bottom line in our relations, that no matter how bad it gets, we shouldn't go beyond a certain bottom line because of the fact that both of us are democracies. The second thing is that both our economies are market driven, and especially after 1991, it has been market driven. And we have much to exchange. We have much to gain by exporting to the United States and importing from the United States. United States is the premier innovation country. And all economists know that the bulk of economic growth, for an accelerating economic growth, is provided by innovations, not by more capital, more labor. In fact, the more and more capital you pump in and the more and more labor you employ, there will be a law of diminishing returns. And that means going along a curve, sooner or later, the curve starts bending downwards. So we have to jump from curve to curve in order to accelerate our growth rate. And that can only be done by innovation. And the United States has much to offer. We have also shown that we, given a little chance on software, we are the best in the world. And in fact, we find, corporations in America now are headed by Indians. I mean, really prestigious corporations are being held by Indians. And in you yourself was in a high position in a telecom company. So therefore, the fact that we are both market economies should be another baseline for our relations so that it doesn't go beyond a certain level. Then there is the question that the political and social elite in both countries, they can converse directly in English. We have got English as a byproduct of imperialism, but English would have been long forgotten after these last 70 years, but for the fact that English became a language of the United States in globalization. So the United States is responsible for the continuing dominance of English in the globe, and both of us can exchange. We can read our research papers, technical jargons, everything is very easy for our elites to interact. So this is a third reason why it will be easier to work with the United States than any other country, and that should be another bottom line. Let's also remember that we have, I think, 6 million Indians in the United States, if I'm not wrong. Maybe it's a little less. I don't know what the latest figure is, but I was last time told it was 6 million. But anyway, we have now demonstrated that at the margin, we are a factor in the elections. And all this howdy Modi and hello Trump, these are all these jamborees we have had are basically to influence the electorate. Because at the margin, and the Indians are now very well to do, they are financiers of elections. And therefore, Indians are also now getting elected to Congress and so on in larger and larger numbers. So I think we must ensure that bad relations with the United States would affect this community, and this community then sends back a lot of money to our what we call as the NRI fund to our country. So this is another reason why we must strive hard to see that our relations don't deteriorate for political or international reasons beyond a point. So there is a bottom line, and then there is a ceiling also. Now the ceiling is the thing that worries a person like me. The United States has no record of treating countries equally. And for instance, in the case of Australia or Japan or even Europe, United States has a relationship which is not, I wouldn't call it equal. And therefore, we have to be a junior partner. And I'm not sure with a country with 1.3 billion people, with China on the border, and having, now China, because they wanted to, because of their enmity with USSR and a common enmity, they built the Chinese to be able to take on the USSR. But the USSR collapsed. Now it's only Russia, and a much weaker Russia. So the United States now is getting a little edgy about the fact that China talks to them in a language of equality. And it's not necessary that China follows policy on Iran or Middle East or any other part as per the United States wishes. So what we have to make a choice. If we are with the United States, you get technology and you get the most modern weapons. But you will have to then do something for the United States. They're not going to give free. As you know, Americans are all give and take. And if you want to take without giving, they think they're a rascal. And if you give without taking, then they think you're an idiot. So therefore, we have to see that relationship. I think with China as a neighbor, we should work while maintaining a bottom line, secure bottom line on how the relations go. But at the same time, position ourselves as a world global power and try and establish globally a triangle of China, United States, and India, rather than allow the United States influence in our country to such an extent that they will also be a determining factor in our bilateral relations with other countries. Over to you, Rajiv.
No, this is wonderful. I think these are very important points. In a few minutes, you've said a lot of good stuff. The importance of the United States is very clear. You've summarized it. At the same time, the importance of India to have to hold its head high and to be treated as an equal is also very clear. And the point you made very nicely, that China stood up, probably the first so-called ally, in quotes, the United States has had, that said, we want to be an equal. Israel not equal, England not equal, Japan, Australia, all of them closest allies of United States, always sort of subservient, with US at the top. China, the first country in modern history, said, okay, we're allies, but equal allies. Now, that was okay until the US realized very recently that this equality is going to cost.
Yes.
If China had played along, not put its cards on the table with this 2025 and 2030 goal of being number one and whatnot in various technologies, if China had not rubbed it in the face, I think they would have been better off. But that's for a discussion we'll later have on China. Because I feel that China will emerge out of this whole crisis exceedingly strong. But while we're on China, one little point I want to make is there's a big difference between the rise of India and the rise of China, in the sense that China's manufacturing and India's services exports to US are quite different. The manufacturing infrastructure is a lot of hard physical logistics, ports, roads, supply lines, the entire, the whole supply chain, very highly automated and very efficient in China, is the result of this whole becoming world-class factory of the world. But in India, the tech, the services sector needs, basically you need a good broadband, and you need people in an office with cubicles and good broadband. They could have the roads, doesn't matter, you can kind of tech infrastructure. So India took the easy route, saying, okay, we're making good money, we can export software people without investment in infrastructure. And so India, rather than saying this should be short term, but we should invest in the long term infrastructure, India did not do enough of that. China, on the other hand, their economy required them to go hand in hand with huge infrastructure. So the reason China is so competitive with the US is because their manufacturing is very efficient. Some of their manufacturing is more cutting edge than American manufacturing. American manufacturing, to bring things back into the US, will have to catch up with technology, some of the manufacturing technology. On the other hand, the services sector, you could flick a switch and move your call center from India to Philippines or wherever you have call center. So the Indian technology exports are more vulnerable because the infrastructure required to replicate that is not as extensive as the manufacturing infrastructure required to replicate what China has done. India's infrastructure for it is not physical, but it's the mentor, it's the people that are trained, the human beings, the Indian software people in millions that have become trained. So we could say that, okay, China's got this physical infrastructure, which is world-class, actually better than the US now for manufacturing economy. We've got the brains infrastructure that we have developed. I understand that. And we can say that, okay, the head of Google and the head of Microsoft and all these companies are Indians. But here is another difference. Individual brilliant people does not translate into intellectual property belonging to India. The brains are Indians, but 30,000 or whatever number working for Microsoft or working for Google or Apple or whatever. The analogy is, when you have bricklayers from Bihar who come to, and they build a very big mansion for a rich man. They send home pictures saying, I built this big house, and the guy is very proud, and he send money home, like Indians sending money home from US. And his matrimonial value goes up because the matrimonial value goes up because he's living in this he's working in this big mansion he's constructing and all that. So compared to other Indians in his village, he's better off, no doubt. But you see, when the project is over, he does not even own one brick out of the thousands of bricks that he laid. He may have laid lakhs of bricks in his life. He does not own the property rights to even one of them. That's like Indians have written millions of lines of code for Microsoft and other people, but no Indian owns one line of code out of that. We're like the bricklayers. The bricklayers are laying bricks, and we are installing lines of code in software. Right. But it's labor. Labor is, you can make money on labor arbitrage, but that's a short-term gain. Long-term, you need your own infrastructure, which is difficult to replicate. You need your own intellectual property. You need your own products. If you take a look at the 100 best apps in the world, on whether it is Android, whether it is Apple, you don't find that many Indian apps in there. But you'll find that most of these apps, whoever owns them, it is Indian brains who wrote the software. You will find that the Indian brains have been used, like the Bihari laborers coming and building things in Delhi, but the Indian worker is not entitled to the intellectual property. I think this is a very serious problem that
Yeah.
we have to hold accountable the billionaires of software and tech who made their money in labor arbitrage and the poor software guys. I mean, I'm a software guy, I champion the software people. The tech people did not get a fair deal. I mean, they have to line up in front of the embassy and get some visa, and like laborers being shunted from here and there. When the job is over in New York, then the guy is assigned to somewhere else in some other place. It's a very, I know a lot of these young people. They're very smart people. They're working very hard. They have not been treated right. And India has used them as sort of a way to just make some quick money. This is a very big difference between India and China. Chinese workers being in factories sit there, stay there, and the infrastructure, it makes it very difficult to take that job away. So this is a point that I think needs to be made.
Well,
what's your thought on this, Dr.
Yeah, shall I take over? Yeah.
Sure, please.
You see, yes, very, very succinctly put. And I think we should not overestimate our ability until we go into the design thing. Even in computers, in software, we have not produced a design status software. It's basically blue collar so far.
Right.
Or a little better than blue collar, but it's not where you are on an innovative status. You see.
Right.
But I would give you see during the time I've been a minister, much too briefly, of course, but I had the occasion to deal with both China and United States on not a big matter, but these are important to show the psychology of the two countries, how different they are. In the United States, when we took over, that is Chandrasekhar took over, we were about to default on our foreign exchange payments because we had just squandered the little foreign exchange we had, and Chandrasekhar told me that we have to default. I said, you can't do that. Our name will be mud. So he said, then you find a way. And I found that we were short by 1991 prices level. $2 billion would be about $20 billion today. We were short of that. And so question is where to get it. And that time the finance minister was Yashwant Sinha, and he just threw up his hands. In fact, no country wanted to give him an appointment. And when he went to Japan, they made him sit in the waiting room for about 2 hours. So, I mean, they basically said, no, you collapse, you do this, you do that. And the IMF was putting all kinds of conditions, which Chandrasekhar was not willing to accept. So when he asked me to take over, I don't know how to proceed, but I thought the only people who can help us is the United States, but they'll want something. But luckily, the American ambassador came to my office and he said, the Prime Minister has asked me to talk to you. And therefore, you see, he said that we are going to go to war with Saddam Hussein, and that is the first Gulf War. And we want our planes coming in from Philippines and going to Saudi Arabia to refuel in India. And we know that you have views which are different from the previous government's views on international relations. So we thought that we'll put it to you bluntly. So I told him that, how much are you going to pay me for that? So he said, we'll pay you 3 times the landing price that other commercial airlines pay you. I said that I can't change the government policy, our traditional policy for just peanuts like that. I'm in need of $2 billion for my economy, and if you can get it from the IMF without conditions, then the game is on. Then you can start from tomorrow refueling. So he said, no, how can we do that? I said, then let's call it off. Then, of course, he let out a few American abuses, knowing that I was America trained, called me an SOB and all that. And then he did deliver. We got $2 billion without any conditions from the IMF because the Americans have 87% of the voting power in the IMF. So this is the way the Chinese Americans will argue today. If you want to be friends, why don't you send troops to Afghanistan? But our people, they think this is something that's never happened in the history of our entire existence, and nobody wants to do it. Why not? It's POK has to be taken. The border of Afghanistan with this POK. It's an ideal thing, and we have now got a port with Iran, Chabahar, and so you can solve this Pakistani problem if we go and put troops in there. That's what we are not doing. And so now the Chinese, the Americans have gone over to the Pakistanis. And with the help of Pakistanis, they got the Taliban. They made a deal. Tomorrow, Taliban will take over Afghanistan. Then we are going to get the blunt hits of both Taliban and Pakistan. So here is the question where you have to make certain basic decisions. You want to be an equal with America, then you must do something which other countries can't do. You know that Europe can't do. Japan can't do. Today, America, to get out of the situation they are in Afghanistan, and perhaps in future, maybe in Saudi Arabia, they will need troops, and they don't want to commit troops. And we are in a position to work with them. And they are people who say, we'll open our warehouses, and you pick whatever weapons you want. So I think this psychological change the Indians will have to undergo if you really want equality with America. Same thing with China, but in a different. They are emotional people. When I first decided to get the Kailash Mansar open, Moraji Desai was Prime Minister, told me, "Don't be mad. It won't. They are Chinese people, are horrible people. They eat cockroaches. They eat this. They no. Give me all this." And they are very different people. They will never agree. Why should they? They are communists. In the end, they did. And we got Kailash Mansar open, and they've never closed it, no matter how bad our relations were in any particular period. They've done other things. They've closed the route which got opened at our Prime Minister's request through Sikkim. They have closed that now, and they've closed it for almost 2 years now. So why did they do it? Because they felt that at the time then they were really down. At that time, I had been of assistance to them, for example, in GDP figures, which I calculated by which the Chinese could get loans from World Bank. Similarly, when I was told when Chandrasekhar was Prime Minister that China has refused from 1983 to sign a bilateral trade agreement. But when I went there as Commerce Minister, they signed within the first half an hour of my arrival, and my first meeting was within half an hour. So they are people who want to know, what is your stand going to be? Tomorrow the United States attacks us on Taiwan. Are you going to be neutral, or are you going to be with the United States? Tomorrow we have a problem with the United States in other matters. So this is another thing we will have to say. If you want to be friends with China, then you have to be neutral between the United States and China. If you want to be a friend of the United States, then you will have to participate in helping the United States out of their difficult situations where they are losing lives. So is there via media in this that you can do both? That's where we will have to apply our minds. I think there is, but it will take a much longer time discussion on that. So I would personally say I would like the United States and India to be close, good friends. But at the same time, the neighbor is China, and we need China's neutrality as far as dealing with Pakistan is concerned. So we have to find a way to be friends with China, and at the same time, the friends of the United States. That's why I'm talking about the triangle.
Yeah, this is wonderful. I think what you're illustrating is that India's policy needs to be pragmatic rather than emotional, rather than tamasha, rather than symbolic. Too much emphasis on symbolism, particularly when you are dealing with the United States. It's like, I'll do this for you. What can you do for me? You want this? Here's what I want. It's transactional.
That's exactly
so now, yeah. So if you are talking about boots on the ground in Afghanistan, long ago, Now maybe it's too late, but long ago when US was really into it, desperate to get out and have Indian boots on the ground, India should have said, and I even proposed this to some person in Delhi who was important at that time,
Yes.
that India should say, for our people, 1 lakh boots on the ground in Afghanistan, we need access from the Indian Ocean, and that is blocked because Balochistan is part of Pakistan. And if we could get a 100 kilometer window, or it doesn't have to be all of Balochistan, we need you to secure a certain route from the Indian Ocean to Afghanistan, which will go over Balochistan. Either you give them independence and get rid of the Pakistan nation and as a unity, or at least one part of it you carve it out. If you can do that, we can put boots on the ground and you can get out of there.
Right.
But you have to secure that. Now, at least that thing should have been put on the table. That this is a very big problem of yours. It's the number one problem, costing money, lives, all of that, and we can solve it. But then you got to solve our problem. This is the kind of deal for a deal-making mentality that I don't think I don't want to trivialize our people. They are smart people and they're very good, but they have not produced the results of actual strategic deals, which are of pragmatic consequence. And hiding behind the tamasha all the time, it runs out. But people in India, they're still into this. Okay, there's this tamasha going on, and so sent this tweet, and so sent him this gift and whatnot. And we think that means a lot, but actually, at the end of it, it's very superficial. So I want to say now, move on to this US, because of the COVID crisis.
Yes.
The US for the next 2 years will be economically bogged down with domestic, trying to fix the domestic situation. And the US will emerge very strong again, because it always has. You cannot, like Warren Buffett said a few days ago, don't bet against America, because it will come back. It'll really come back. And he's lived through so many downturns and upturns, and it always come back. And I agree with that. Don't bet against America. It will be a 2-year downturn, but America will come back. Yeah. Now, the trade war with China was already there. And then this COVID has also put suspicion on China, and people want to relocate and all that. But, Indians think that we'll get all these factories to India, but it's not so simple.
Yeah.
First of all, one of the most likely scenarios is for United States to come up with a huge incentive, financial incentive, for people who relocate the factories back to USA, because it will create the jobs we need. There's a lot of unemployment in USA. So instead of saying, okay, move the factories from China to some other country, it is, we'll give you some incentives, all kind of financial stuff to move the factories back to USA, create the jobs in the USA. So that's likely to happen. Another thing that's likely to happen is other countries are well equipped for the Chinese manufacturing, like Vietnam, Cambodia, surrounding countries, because they have the infrastructure. Philippines. India has to now understand, if it wants some share of this China stuff to be relocated to India, India has to work hard. And this is not something that politicians know how to do. It is not something that bureaucrats, foreign ministers kind of people know how to do. This is something that corporate people need to do. Corporate India is being ignored by the Indian government. I mean, so many corporate people tell me the Indian government doesn't listen to them. They go to them with economic policies. They're looked upon with suspicion. They're kept out there. There are so many, there's hardly any major Indian industrialists who are part of the government thinking, they should be taking teams of Indian industrialists, sending them as delegates to the pharma industry in the USA, to the tech industry, to the auto industry, they should take industrialists to go and talk to industrialists.
Yeah.
Because Indian industrialists know how to talk to American industrialists. Indian bureaucrats don't know how. So this is I think that a part of the problem in India is the IAS is too strong. The PMO's office, which is the IAS Babus, the elite IAS Babus, are too strong. And certain things which they are not capable of doing don't get done. But the pride and arrogance is such that if you take them on, then they'll just shut you out or get rid of you or something. So this is something the Prime Minister has not taken on the Indian bureaucracy. And unless you take on the Indian bureaucracy, you can make you can do tamasha and you can talk high flown stuff, but it is the bureaucrats who have to execute it. They control the machinery, and that has not changed. The bureaucrats are what they were, how they were. I mean, I've gone and talked to the Foreign Service Institute several times and talked about foreign policy matters. I went to the IS Academy in Missouri, talked to them. So I understand their pulse. They are very much set in their ways. I would say it's the most powerful union in India. The most powerful trade union in India are the bureaucrats. So what do you think of that, Dr. Swamy?
I agree. So let me start with a very important point you made. This crazy dream that people are having that now the American companies will come running to India. First of all, people have not studied the Chinese economy. The Chinese don't manufacture anything at all. Frankly, this may surprise you, but I'm telling you, after a deep study of the Chinese economy, what the Chinese do is they import semi-processed goods from East Asia, and then they add value to it, and then export it to the United States. These East Asian countries are unable to export to the United States because they have become almost developed, and therefore their cost prices are too high, the labor wages are too high. So therefore the Chinese proposed to them, this is starting with the 1978, 79 when Deng Xiaoping took over, that you would take, for instance, Lenovo. The entire technicalities of the laptop is produced in Taiwan. It comes to China, goes to Shenzhen or Dalian or some places like that, and there they put the keyboard, they put the case, they put the glass, the screen, and then they put the stamp on it, made in China, and export it to the United States. And so if you look at the Chinese trade data, they're always in the negative as far as East Asia is concerned. And they're in a huge positive when it comes to Europe and America, because what they lose with the East Asians, they make up by selling it at the appropriate price in the West. So that trade we are not in a position to replicate, because we today, if you get something from Japan to India, the bureaucracy, the roads, the efficiency in the ports and the airports, your packing capacity, none of it is ready for that. The Japanese and the South Koreans tell me, we love India because there's a democracy, we love India because there's a court system, we know our intellectual properties are safe, but you are going to put so many obstacles in our way that we don't think we can function in India. So you got to get that first of all ready, and then you've got about 5 years, because now China has understood that this can't go on forever. In fact, their labor is also becoming expensive. So now they have a policy which is called rebalancing, and in that rebalancing, they are now started to put factories which produce ab initio don't exist in China. It's all value-added processing that goes on, and that is why we cannot just inherit what the Chinese are going to lose if the Americans get tough with them.
Yeah, so it's a very sophisticated Chinese supply chain.
Yes,
managing stuff from one place, putting things together from here, there, real-time inventory, real-time movement, all sorts of computerized logistics and so on. Yes. So I think that's their genius, that they have taken multi-location, multi-country, and figured out how to optimize the logistics in a very clever way. This logistics of the supply chain is not something you can turn on overnight, and India has not been able to do that. Even domestically within India, the development is sporadic, fragmented. It's not integrated together into very efficient supply chains. So this replicating of China into India is not going to be difficult, not going to be easy, except in isolated cases where something is very independent, not contingent upon a whole lot of other things that can be manufactured in isolation. Those kind of things, I think, are more likely. What I want to move on to is, India needs to. We talk about soft power, but India has not utilized the ICCR, the Indian Council of Cultural Relations, has not done its job in terms of impact. The Nehru centers, there's no impact. I mean, Doordarshan should have become on par with Al Jazeera. I mean, why should a small country like Qatar have Al Jazeera, which is on par with BBC and CNN and Fox in terms of an international footprint? And it is not like a Hindu pravachan being taught. It's not an Islamic pravachan being taught. They're talking about all the topics, that whether it is sports and cricket and movies or global warming or whatever it is, you name it, when they have shows on science. So it is a very comprehensive. They have very sophisticated people. They've been from all over the world, given their salaries and brought them in. So in India, the closest you can get would be some guru channel which is teaching very sort of straightforward pujas and all that. I'm not talking about that. And I'm not talking about Doordarshan, which doesn't have the class and the finesse. Republic TV is more for emotional shouting people. It is not serious. You can't take it seriously. And so India has not been able to put together the Indian version of an Al Jazeera. And you have all the small little, you have so many Nehru centers, you have ICCR with so much clout and so much budget. You have Doordarshan. You have talent in India in the TV industry, in the production industry, you have articulate journalists, but we've not been able to do it. So this is when we talk about soft power, this is the kind of thing, institutionalized soft power on a very large scale is what counts. And we have not been able to do that. Your thoughts, Dr. Swamy?
Well, I 100% agree. I mean, we live in a world of our own. We fool ourselves. We go by atmospherics. The Chinese go by sentiment, and then they keep to their word. They're stuck with Pakistan for such a long time. Of course, now that the Xinjiang problem has come, they're a little cut up with the Pakistanis, but they're not going to let them go that easily. And the Americans are bread and butter, but we are just atmospherics. He said this to me, he embraced me, he hugged me, and he said, what a wonderful man you are. This is what the press also says. I don't blame politicians. The press also plays up India now strategic partner. How many strategic partners? We have even signed a strategic understanding with Nigeria. Now, I'm not able to understand what strategic cooperation we can have with Nigeria. It's not that we shouldn't have good relations with Nigeria, but strategic relations, there should be some priority, some sense. We have strategic relations with America. America couldn't care in two hoots for what they're doing now in Afghanistan, where we are going to be the victims of it. So therefore, I think what you have said is absolutely right. We need to think in terms of cold terms, and therefore you need think tanks which really don't have cronies sitting there, but invite people, discuss, thrash things out, and then submit a proposal to the government. Our think tanks, our governmental body been set up, Indian Council of Social Sciences, they just want to make sure that they don't say something that will annoy the government. If you say to the government that you have made a mess, you don't know what the demand problem is, $5 trillion in 5 years is impossible. It means doubling of the GDP, which means 14.4% per year. It's not practical. Nobody has the nerve to tell the Prime Minister that. So therefore, with this kind of slavish attitude of those who call themselves intellectuals, we have a long way to go in terms of framing strategic options.
I think this is you hit the nail on the head. Delhi cronies, the cronies to the whole Delhi establishment. I see them here in the US a lot. I mean, it's like the amount of bhav they get, the amount of recognition and honor and support they get from India is huge, regardless of whether they have merit or not. But they just have to be good cronies, which means they cannot be very intelligent, because if they are very intelligent, they'll be having their own opinions, their own ideas. And so they have to be sort of articulate, but kind of not too smart to threaten the establishment in Delhi, and be willing to suck up to them, waste a lot of time. So this cronyism breeds mediocrity. India has such a lot of brains, such huge amount of brains, not being utilized optimally. So I want to now talk about another topic in this US India, that is the election. the
We'll have to do another session for that, I think.
a lot of Trump behavior now. Yeah, we can have a, maybe what we'll do is we'll talk about US elections in
Yes.
another session.
Yes, very
So
good
just to close on, just a final point I want to make.
Yes.
Yeah, that will be a good subject. The final point I want to make is that what we are talking about is India needs to have its soft power, but India also needs to talk about hard power. And
Yeah.
soft power cannot be a substitute for hard power. You can teach yoga, and you can teach, Ayurveda, and you can teach all those good things. Americans will love it. Americans will love it. But as far as institutions of power are concerned, they want to do transactions. And so you cannot say that I gave you yoga, therefore, as far as some solid corp deal is concerned or military deal is concerned, it compensates and it's a payment for that. That's not true, because that's a separate domain. That's a separate level. And so Indians have to understand that soft power is soft power. Culture, Bollywood, cricket, yoga, food, all that is wonderful. It creates an atmosphere which is very nice. It opens a door and you can get to know each other. But you must talk at the hard power level of military, of money, economics, finance, all of that. You have to talk. You have to talk
Yes.
Turkey. You have to talk in the
Yes.
mindset, which is a very dark deal.
Yeah.
That's my. It needs to improve in its posture towards America.
Well said. Well said. Yes, Jagdish.
Yeah, thank you, Rajiv Malhotra ji and Dr. Subramaniam Swamy, for that interesting session on the US influence on India. That was a lot of information you all had, and it was thought-provoking. So with this, we come to the end of another episode. Just to tell our viewers that this was our 35th episode since the lockdown worldwide. And we thank our viewers for their encouragement and support for these Words of Wisdom Gyan Ganga program. I also wish.
So can I?
Yes, please, please.
Go ahead. No, before you close, I just want to mention
please.
my channel.
Yeah, please.
Could I do that?
Yes, please.
I didn't mean to interrupt you. Sorry. So those of you who want to keep in touch with many things that I'm doing, you can go to rajivmalhotra.official. That is the YouTube channel. Rajivmalhotra.official is also our Facebook channel. And Rajiv Message, @Rajiv Message, is our Twitter. And I'm really indebted to Dr. Swamy for these stimulating conversations. I learn a lot. And I'm indebted to Jagdish Shetty for doing so much hard work. And I think we should also mention Ramesh, who's behind the scenes, the brains behind all this. He's doing the infrastructure, the logistics infrastructure, making sure that all this happens. So I want to thank everybody, and Brian, of course, on our side, who's doing a remarkable job. Thank you.
Yeah. So thank you, Rajuji. As I mentioned, this program, most of our program, the entire credit goes to our team led by Arvind Chaturvedi, Ramesh Swamy, Ashish Shetty, Tejas for this program, Brian and Rakesh and Ishwar for putting this program together. We will be again having Rajiv Malhotra ji next week for another episode, a special episode. Wish to remind our viewers that tomorrow we'll be having RVS Mani, who has been in the Ministry of Home Affairs earlier and who has written a book, The Myth of Hindu Terror, Insider's Account of Ministry of Home Affairs 2006-2010. And he will be speaking on the dimensions of terrorism and the dangers of terrorism. So do you get tuned in tomorrow at 8 p.m. to have the discussion between Dr. Swamy and RVS Mani. Thank you, Dhanyavad, and Jai Hind.
Jai Hind.
Thank you.